In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A look back at 2025 and a look ahead at 2026. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by two journalists from the Daily Memphian to talk about some of the biggest stories of the year and some of the biggest stories we think for next year. Laura Testino, reporter with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And Bill Dries, also a reporter with the Daily Memphian. We were talking before, and we have a small group today because it's just scheduling and holidays, but it's great to have you both here and have been here a bunch through the year. And while I think, unanimously, the biggest story of 2025 is clearly the task force and all the ramifications, one of the biggest stories, if not for that, would have been, I think, Laura, and a story you've covered extensively, is everything going on at Memphis-Shelby County Schools. And so I wanted to start there, and we'll talk some about elections. We'll come back to the task force. We'll talk about all kinds of things. But the legislature is right around the corner, the new legislative session. Last year, they tried to do essentially a takeover of Memphis-Shelby County Schools.
Right.
They have shifted the election cycle, and we'll talk a bunch about elections. But just give us a lowdown of what happened last year and then segue into what could or will happen next year with Memphis-Shelby County Schools. $1.9, almost $2 billion budget, all the students, all the impact. Go ahead.
Sure. So I think everyone can remember this time last year, we were sort of in this 6-week period of ouster proceedings for then Superintendent Marie Feagins that sort of ignited this always looming but had been kind of dormant idea at the state legislature to initiate a takeover of Memphis-Shelby County Schools. You really saw some community pushback against what the board was doing that really drove a lot of support for some kind of intervention from the state. When we get through to the end of the legislature in April, you see the Senate and the House bills just don't quite align and don't agree on what kind of takeover that should be and what this appointed board should be able to do, or even who should appoint the board. We know that both lawmakers, Senator Taylor and Rep. White, plan to revive that legislation here in the second year of the 2-year session coming up soon. From everything that I have heard from a handful of sources, it's probably going to be a pretty speedy session, and I expect this to be a top priority when lawmakers convene early in January. But it, kind of, I think, still remains to be seen a little bit which way that compromise could go. Once it gets hammered out, it won't have to go through all of those committee processes again, and so it could be pretty quick once it happens. But as of now, it's still not quite clear what. Who is going to prevail and which frame will work.
We had Representative Mark White from Germantown and Brent Taylor from Memphis and East Memphis and Eads and so on, State Senator, on to talk about this. I can't remember if it was with you or you and Bill, but it seemed clear talking to them that they can come together and agree on this because they are so set on some sort of takeover, and Senator Taylor called it a takeover. Some of the hang-up seems, and the question for you or maybe for Bill, is the legislature often doesn't mind a bill that targets a given community. They just don't want that bill to hit everybody. The same way vouchers over the years started in only a couple of the cities and then grew and grew and grew, and lots of other legislative action. People in Memphis often think that the legislature just targets them. It's not necessarily always the case. I mean, sometimes it's the cities, sometimes it's rural areas. Is that still the hang-up, is how they craft this bill so that legislators who are like, yeah, sure, you can do that in Shelby County, just don't do it in my district. Is that one of the biggest hang-ups?
I think it's certainly a factor, right? We had a story in March that laid out, based off of each different bill, just how many other districts across the state would be potentially targets as well if, it were to go into effect. I expect that there will be some aspect of this where, the Tennessee Department of Education may have to decide, it may give authority to a department, state official to determine, and that would sort of, maybe alleviate that it's the bill specifically that is saying this is what must happen to these specific school districts, but it gives some of that ultimate determination to the department. But I think that the other part of it is, how much responsibility and for how long does the state want to oversee Memphis-Shelby County Schools? Yeah. We've still got the state-funded $6 million forensic audit going on. That contract is going through January of 2027. If you're using Tennessee State University and that forensic audit as a precedent, which was done by the same firm, Clifton Larson Allen, you're not necessarily going to get preliminary findings.
Okay, that was going to be my question. Do we know anything yet?
And so we don't have anything yet, and they're 6 months into an 18-month contract. So it stands to reason that, this takeover legislation could get to a point where, lawmakers are voting on it for passage or not without the information, that both lawmakers who are sponsoring it were hoping to see, to explain sort of what they may be in for if they're assigning an appointed board to be over the budget of the district.
We'll talk a bunch more about schools and vouchers and Ruddock Richmond, the interim superintendent, but I want to bring Bill in and maybe give us the lay of the land on the elections of school board members and how that shifted, and then we'll segue into some other. It's a big election year on the county, state level. It's not a city election year, but they're county mayor, county sheriff, county clerk, assessor, county commission, lots of legislators.
Every county office except General Sessions Court clerk, juvenile court judge, and district attorney general.
And all the judges, the county judge, what we think
No
is...
judges.
No judges.
No judges.
But let's start with the school. What's going on with them? What was changed? Because there still will be a school board under both these proposals. It's just there will be an oversight board, whatever you want to call it, above them.
Well, in October, the Shelby County Commission voted to move all 9 school board seats to the same ballot. And right now, or up to this point, you had 5 school board seats in one even year election cycle and the remaining 4 in the next even year cycle. Now, by the county commission's action, under a new state law that applied only to Shelby and Knox counties, all 9 Memphis-Shelby County school board seats moved to the 2026 ballot. The school board is suing over that, claiming that state law is unconstitutional.
And they're suing the Shelby County Election Commission.
Right.
Which
in essence, to take it off the ballot.
From being put out there that way.
Yeah. So if that lawsuit succeeds, you have 4 school board races. If it stands, you have all 9 seats on the ballot.
This makes my head hurt for 16 years of doing the show with you. What are the election cycles next year? I need to just print it out and keep it in my wallet. So the school board will be the schools will be on the ballot. What time of year in 2026?
Starting with the primaries in May. On the May ballot.
It will be partisan, so we'll have Democrat. Okay, and then the runoff.
The winners advance to the August ballot for the county general election.
Okay. Let's stay with elections. Let's go to some of these other races, and we'll circle back to some school stuff with Lori here. But what the other big ones, obviously, county mayor and sheriff is a big one this year. It seems to me, for those engaged in the kind of civic stuff that we talk about. Because of the jail, if nothing else. Crime is already on the agenda. The spike in crime through COVID, that's come down. Again, the task force, which we've done a million shows on the task force, why I'm kind of doing it midway through the show. We'll get more and more into the task force, but we've covered it so extensively. But the sheriff and the jail, and whatever you think of the jail, and Aaron Fleming on our staff, others have done amazing work on the conditions in the jail, talking to people in the jail, the days it takes just for intake to get people in there. Even for the people who maybe think, well, don't commit a crime, you won't go to a jail that has terrible conditions. And separate from the fact of you're innocent till proven guilty, it just seems like just at a coldest, most callous level, the county is at risk of massive lawsuits. And if you look at the Tyree Nichols situation and the multi-million-dollar potential payout that the Nichols family could get for that horrific incident, now you've got this jail that is just almost feels, and I've heard people say, like a ticking time bomb, again, on the coldest possible level of what could happen on the conditions, separate from the humanity, separate from the legalities. of how the jail should be treating people, and that's all under the sheriff, and of course the funding could come from county commission and whoever else.
And the jail is really the central issue in the race for sheriff, which you have no incumbent seeking re-election to that or to county mayor. But the question is going to be, given the fact that it took 10 years to build the jail that we have now, whoever is elected is not going to be able to, work with others to finance and build the jail overnight. It's going to take quite a long time. So the question in the campaign is not only should there be a new jail, but what steps should be taken to alleviate the problems that, at least to some degree, are questions of how the jail is operated, as well as the condition the jail is in.
Yeah, and we had County Mayor Lee Harris, who's termed out, not running again, and he talked about how he's open to, they just took over a lot of the juvenile detention facility. He's very happy with how that's going and feel like they're treating people better and doing a better job on all the fronts of recidivism and treatment and learning and just conditions. He's talked about, he floated with us, right? I mean, the idea of maybe a private contractor coming in, something that he's opposed his entire political career, but he said it's so bad we need to start looking at other options. That'll also involve the county commission. It involves a question of downtown development. Is the jail going to move? There's a proposal to put up on the old Firestone plan in Fraser. I mean, how does that's county commission and county mayor making some of those decisions, even though, as we said, the sheriff is really probably the most important person.
Well, the sheriff runs the jail.
Yeah.
But this is the same thing as with the school board. The school board has no taxing authority.
Right.
Neither does the sheriff. So the process of a new jail and a reformed jail involves the sheriff, the mayor, the county commission, probably the state at some degree, although the state's going to be a pretty hard sell in terms of getting funding out of them.
And people are talking about $1 billion. I think it's going to be a bunch more than that. I think that's just a number they put out there. But again, we'll come back to some of these other races. But that money that's being sort of talked about for the jail out of the county budget without a ton of state support, and you've got Regional 1, which we'll try to talk about, and we've talked about quite a bit on the show, of that, quote, $1 billion proposal for a whole new campus and new partnerships and so on. All that pushes up against school funding. And a lot of really great, deep work that you've done on some of the, not just the big projects, the new schools that they want to build, but just what they do with old schools and how they sell them off or give them away or keep them from becoming blighted. Like, talk about the money involved there, or take that however you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we've also, the county has no bonding authority this year either, right? Like, after the state has come in and...
The comptroller came in and said, sell your horses on...
Yes, essentially after a couple of years of letters saying, hey, you need to get this stuff in order, the requests for the budget that the state comptroller wanted to see to approve it didn't come through. They issued this letter. It's the first time it's been issued to a county in Tennessee. Some cities have had it happen, but the county cannot go out for bonds.
For 6 more months.
Until the end of the fiscal year, right. And, the bonding documents show they weren't planning to until the next year anyway, but they still have to get those things fixed under the state comptroller to be able to do that. Separately from that, the funding is going to be a stretch, right? The wheel tax revenues are what they are. They have been difficult to even predict and keep count of in recent years. And you also have now, for the first time in a long time, a facilities plan from the school district that we reported on just a couple of weeks ago, got the initial draft, to suggest what the school district actually wants to be doing for multiple years down into the future, which is something that county commissioners have asked for years before deciding, here's how much we actually want to fund you every year. And so I think that that's certainly going to push the school district toward some kind of capital campaign, potentially working with the Memphis Chamber to see what kind of private donors can jump into this in the way that XAI is beginning to do for some of these upgrades for schools nearby their companies. And I would anticipate that that's going to have to be the way of Regional 1 and the jail as well, seeking funding outside of what's available in the county if we want all of these billion-dollar projects to take place over the same 10-year period.
And how many, help me, this story, again, I should say we're taping this on Tuesday, it's airing on Friday, so if anything big happened, we're not just, we missed it because we weren't here. But how many schools were total to be closed in the most recent plan? Say that again.
It would be 15 over the next 3 years is how far this looks out.
Out of 260 buildings, give or take, 270 buildings.
Out of 150 buildings that the district has control over closing.
Control over closing, okay.
Yeah.
I did an interview, you've interviewed her, Katie Smythe, who's from New Valley of Memphis, is now trying to do an arts-oriented charter school in the old Humes Middle School. Interviewed her, and she has done amazing things, and other people in the city and area have done amazing things. But to hear her talk about that one facility and repurposing it is public money, tens of millions in private dollars, and many, many years to get it going, and then to start with one grade and then add the grades, as often charter schools do. It was really striking to talk to her about it and how hard it is, because you'll hear people toss around with these empty schools. Oh, it can be a community center, or it can be a homeless facility. It can be all these well-intentioned facilities, but then when you realize how beat up, and you've done this amazing work on it, but how much work it takes to bring them up to code, to make them safe, to fix the lights, all that kind of stuff, it's daunting to think about what's going to happen to all these facilities.
Sure, and whether or not that will push whoever is leading the school board or the school district itself to choose to demolish these buildings more quickly than to let them sit and have all of them be repurposed.
Yeah. 10 minutes here in show, I mentioned Regional 1 bill, Regional 1, and the proposal that Mayor Lee Harris, who is termed out, but he was on the show a few weeks ago, and people can go back and listen to that at WKNO.org or YouTube or listen to the podcast. He has been a huge advocate for this massive rebuilding of a new facility and the new partnerships with UTHSC, making a teaching facility. Other people have raised questions about how do you pay for that, given the context of all these other things, the jail, the schools, the bonding, the warning shot, if nothing else, that the comptroller said to the state, like, you're not going to, even if they weren't going to borrow for 6 months, it was something of an assertion of authority that we'll reassess at the end of that 6 months, right? And they're going to have to do some bonding. The state has not come forward with a ton of any money, any commitment to this Regional 1 facility. Again, with this election year, how much do you think for county commission and county mayor, without Lee Harris pushing that, are other legislators and a future county mayor is that going to be a big issue to talk to them about? Or are they going to run away from that and say, I don't know that I even want to go there?
Well, that they might, depending on who gets elected. But I think that what Mayor Harris sees is that if you get a project to a certain point, the person who is elected next, in essence, has no choice but to pursue that. And we've seen that with the start of construction on the new Fraser High School. The fact that you have something coming up out of the ground has a tremendous political impact on what happens next. Regional 1 is encountering some pretty significant headwinds right now, to the degree that Mayor Harris has said during this last year in office, that's his number one priority in Nashville, is to bring in the state funding, which Governor Lee had tentatively committed to several years ago. Meanwhile, the hospital itself has now said, we're focusing on the $900 million just for the main hospital building. That's our focus. The rest, we hope, will follow it, but that's where our head's at now.
And the county has voted and committed to what,
$350 million over several years.
Yeah, and Lears makes the case, and I think I told the story. I mean, my father was in Regional 1 back when it was the Med. I mean, many, many people in the community have these amazing experiences of the incredible work that the Med, now Regional 1, does. I don't think it's a debate about that. It's about, can the county and the area afford it? Will the state come in with big money? Will philanthropy, sometimes Memphis has some incredibly generous folks who come forward with things. And as Lee Harris talked about, are there federal sources or national philanthropies that could come in and help that plan come to life?
And there is this whole complex arrangement that would essentially make the state a co-owner of what is now a county-owned hospital exclusively, and that involves becoming a medical academic center on all this as well. So the question is, where is it in terms of the priority, keeping in mind that with all of these projects we're talking about, timing is critical.
Yeah, and the only other part that I'll mention we'll be definitely following is there's been pressure, what about Methodist? Methodist has some capacity, that unused capacity in some of its buildings. Could Methodist be a part of this? And we have said, and others have said, well, that's just Jeff Warren, city councilman saying that. I've heard definitely behind the scenes, lots of the business community and other folks saying, no, we got to get them together. We have more capacity here. We need to get them to work together. But we've got 6 minutes in show. Let me do this with you. Other things quickly. I mean, one obviously we talked. It's funny that it was a year ago that former Superintendent Marie Feagins that was then let go. She has since declared she's running for county mayor, so that plays into it. I don't know if you want to touch on that, but also voucher use, which is the Feagins thing is interesting, and we will certainly be following that. We had our own, the Daily Memphian, strange run-in with Marie Feagins, through her lawyer asking for money to take back a story or something. It was very strange. We wrote about it. All that is interesting. We'll be covering it. But in a sense, vouchers is probably more impactful in a lot of ways, right? I mean, in that, now that, talk about some of the writing you've done on that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think also just to kind of close the loop on some of the county things, if, seeing the former superintendent running for the county mayoral seat, I think could certainly change the way that those priorities fall, right? You have somebody who's very focused on education and has only been known as kind of an education-focused person in the county for the year and a half she's been here. So, I expect that to be very interesting throughout the race to see how sort of these priorities shift. As far as vouchers go, we know that it's one and a growing component of ways that Memphis-Shelby County Schools and now the suburban districts are sort of having to face what school choice can do to the predictability of your enrollment, whether that be in your own specific district or to specific schools, which, we'll have some stories about this coming up very soon in the new year. A lot of people in Memphis choose to go to a school that is not the one that they are zoned to attend, which if you think about that in the context of a school district with more than 200 schools for Memphis-Shelby County Schools, it makes it very complicated to determine what to close or what may have more students in the future. If you know that if you close a school, those students may not go to this new school that you zone them to. Those students may go to a separate school. What we know that Vouchers has done is the original program that was supposed to be a pilot program in Memphis, it offers a little bit more money per student and has lower income cap. That's being used by about half of the 5,000 people in Memphis that have vouchers. And those are specifically students zoned to Memphis-Shelby County Schools. What we know about the expansion is that most of those vouchers, which are the, any income limit for the most part, are more for students in wealthier zip codes of Shelby County. The state did not collect data on whether or not those students were already attending private schools, but based off of the way that the expansion works in its second year, that data will have to be collected this time around. So the initial recipients will get priority, so we still won't know what that initial round of students, what their background was, but we will know for the second round whether or not they attended public or private schools.
I should also add that you and I did an interview with interim superintendent Roderick Richmond a few weeks ago that was very interesting for people who are into this, of somebody who's like a lifetime person. As someone said to me afterward, I don't want to say it was boring, but they were sort of like, it was kind of boring in a good way. It was just talking through what needs to be done at the schools. That's a really interesting interview. It gets in some of these things we're talking about and all the changes going on. With just a couple minutes left, how much, Bill, do you think, we've done so many shows on the task force, which is why I didn't really lead with it, other than it is obviously the biggest story of the year. With all these county, when Paul Young was running for city mayor and the others were running for city mayor, it was crime, 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 crime. As Paul Young said, bring down the chaos. A lot of people are feeling a lot of the numbers show that the chaos has come way down. Will people running for county commission, sheriff, county mayor, et cetera, even county clerk, which plays a role in this, do you think they'll run on the Memphis Safe Task Force on the lower crime? They'll run away from it? Or will it just vary by district?
I think they will make the same detailed distinction that Mayor Young has made. I think you're going to find that most, if not all, of the Democratic PAC are going to say, I don't think the Guard needs to be here, but these are federal and state law enforcement agencies. They enforce the law. We need their help. Even in the best of times, they should have some role here.
Yeah, and it feels like most of the Democrats are going to say, hey, what's going on with ICE, we don't want. But we started the year with Worth Morgan long before the head of the Shelby County Republican Party, long before the task force was announced, talking about, yeah, I'm glad Trump is here and I'm glad they're going to be cracking down on illegal immigration. So I think that division of how ICE and others are treating immigrants is going to continue. I didn't give you enough time. We're out of time. We will be doing, though, I will say, as many election-related shows as we can. Bill and I, in the city cycle a couple years ago, we sat down with every viable candidate for city mayor. We'll try to do that again with county mayor, with the county sheriffs. We'll try to get some debates and conversations going. Justin Pearson, Steve Cohen, another big race, all kinds of big races, and obviously a lot more school stuff and community impact that Laura will be doing. But that's all the time we have this week. If you've missed any of the show, go to WKNO.org, Daily Memphian, or YouTube, or download the full podcast of the show wherever you get your podcasts. Happy New Year, and thanks for joining us.